Good afternoon. Welcome to Phoenix or Scottsdale. How many of you, it's your first time here? Okay, yeah, so hopefully you have time to get out and explore a little bit. We're not terribly far from the Fashion Square, which, you can leave a lot of money there if you're not careful. I was also telling a couple people that I know you all talked about esports, and the State Fair opened either yesterday or today, and it's right downtown, and they're going to have like an esports tournament. So if you want to see it live and in person, that would be a good place to go down and check it out. The weather is perfect. It cooled down to a nice 91 degrees, which is the way we like to do fall here in Arizona. So, welcome. To the place that I've called home for about 12 years now. But first I wanted to thank the organizers and thank you for inviting me here today to speak at this conference. When they called me a few months ago, I was really happy to do it because libraries have always had a special place in my heart because it meant so much to me. When I was a girl growing up in Detroit, we were definitely part of the have-nots. My mother had a sixth grade education, from a rural, segregated Virginia school system. And although she had an appreciation for education and even went back later and got her GED so she could help us with homework, we didn't have a lot of resources, at home. Somehow my mom had an old physician's desk reference book, and somewhere along the way acquired the first volume of an ancient encyclopedia set. And I could tell you a lot about places and people, with names that started with an A, but kind of after that I had to get it on my own, and that was going to school and getting it from my school and that library that was in that school, which I thought was the most magical place in the entire building. I loved school from day one, and my son who's 16 does not understand that. My sister who's behind me on the bike, who's older, she remember her starting school and I cried because I couldn't go, and then she came home from half-day kindergarten and just told me all about it. And of course I would set off a fresh round of tears. But finally I was able to go, and I've loved it my entire life. That library was something that fueled my imagination. And when I was a little kid, the thing I wanted more than anything else, I had two wishes, and that was to become a teacher. And the other one was to live in a library, because I just imagined having books and magazines and all kinds of reference items right at my fingertip whenever I wanted them. And so I feel fortunate because I got to be a teacher. I'm a professor of practice at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University. And I do live in a library. It's called the Internet. And the Internet is everything that I thought the library was back then, just this place where I can get everything that I need and I want, just right at my fingertips. But as a journalist, and the way I became a teacher is I was part of that early cohort of journalists who moved over from the newsroom to the Internet. This was back in 1995 when a lot of journalists looked at me kind of crazy, like, well, why would you go over there? Now they ask me at conferences, how did you know? And because I watch a lot of science fiction, how could you not want to be part of this? So today I still carry that wonder of knowledge, and I'm always amazed by stuff that I can find and stuff that I can do. So as the director of the New Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship Lab at the Cronkite School of Journalism, my students help to create innovative products and push the boundaries of immersive technology. Push it beyond games and entertainment to practical applications and mixed reality storytelling. Our portfolio is made up of 360 video, we do virtual reality, augmented reality, we create news games, we work with artificial intelligence and avatars, and we also create new businesses. Some of our students come to me and say, I have an idea for a business where they see that there's a lack of content in a certain area. We even, the young man started the Arizona Center for Investigative Reporting out of my lab about 6 years ago, and that's still going strong. We had a group of students start Terrenial VR, which was a company that did 360 video for people. So that's kind of what we focus in on at our lab. So a lot of people ask me, well, why would such a lab be in a journalism school? And the reason, I think, is because journalism is facing a crisis. News consumption, while high, is changing. Younger people, and even some old heads, are tuning out the legacy media. They're just not waking up in the morning and thinking, let me check the pages of the Washington Post, or let me turn into CBS. There's just so much out there to distract Gen Z and millennials and other people from legacy media. So my mission is really to meet young people and others where they live. And where young people live nowadays is not between the pages of the Washington Post or on NBC News, but in games, in virtual rooms, in Instagram or Snap, and of course on their phones. So in many ways, libraries and schools and journalists, we're all in the same position. It's more important now than ever to prepare students for an uncertain future. And it's important that libraries be that community glue to ensure that members of a community have equal access to information in all of its forms. Libraries, like legacy media, are in the same place. We're trying to figure out how to reach young people today. So what I want to talk to you a little bit about is how can reference libraries change to serve the needs of a society that's undergoing profound change and rapid change, and will continue to undergo that change. Journalists, educators, and information scientists must be in the vanguard of preparing the American people for the most profound change in our economy since the Industrial Revolution. And of course, that was the time when a lot of schools and libraries were created in this country. How many of you saw the movie Ready Player One? Any of you read the book? Movie sucked, but I just want to play a clip for some of you who didn't see it. So again, this came out a couple of years ago, and even then it felt like really cool science fiction and something that could happen in a decade or so. But even as we sit here today, the horizon for that type of world is being recalculated. Fall is always a great time for people in the tech space because this is the time of year when, Apple and Amazon and Google and Facebook and all these other big companies make their major announcements and pronouncements about some of the stuff that's coming in the next 6 to 12 months, or we get hints of what might be coming. And at the Facebook Oculus conference, developers conference just a week ago, Mark Zuckerberg said this: it's no longer a question of if, but when, essentially the oasis, when the coming together of AR and VR will change the way we communicate, change the way we interface with different people. And he's right, but the other thing that he said was that it's coming, it's just not coming this Christmas. You have to give us a little bit more time to get it right. And I definitely think that that's the case. Facebook and Amazon are racing, and Apple too. They're spending millions, billions of dollars racing to become the post-web interface. And it's something that we need to pay attention to as journalists, as educators, and as librarians. One of the things that came out was how much money that Facebook is putting into these things that I think Orwell called telescreens, but it'll allow you to have your Jetson moment. Do you know who the Jetsons are? Okay, who doesn't know who the Jetsons are? Okay, all right, so that was a cartoon back in the day where it was set in the future. But with these telescreens or these smart screens, basically what they are devices that will let you communicate with people, call your loved ones, you can see them in real time, they can see you in real time. And you might be thinking, well, can't we do that with Google, Google Hangouts and Skype and Zoom? But if you've ever been on Skype, you know what an inferior experience that is. With these devices, you're able to do so much more. For example, you can, if you're a grandma and you're trying to read to your grandchild in another city, not only can you read the book, but the screen, you can touch filters where you'll morph into the big bad wolf or the pretty princess. Now, that's some pretty crazy stuff right there. But imagine being able to communicate with people in that real time. But it's not stopping there. And I think while that's interesting, and some of these devices will range in size from a tablet size screen to a 55-inch, that's not the most fascinating thing that's coming along. What's really interesting to me is what's happening in the social VR space. And in the social VR space, what we're seeing is that there's a lot more interaction. This is a screenshot from a football game that lots of people attended, but they attended as avatars. All right? So in this space, you can go in, you can wall yourself off, you can meet friends, you can do all kinds of things. So I wanted to show you a little bit of what that's like. We can go to Facebook videos.
Beyond our world, there's another world.
So this is Facebook
and it's
Horizon.
Right here, on my face. Welcome. This is Horizon. Think of me as your guide / self-appointed spokes avatar, here to show you around. You know, Horizon is filled with possibilities. You can play stuff, make stuff, fly stuff. Whoa! Really love the stash, Stuart.
What up, Stuart?
Wait, I want a mustache. Horizon isn't about rules or limits or pants or people telling you not to fly an airplane while drinking your fresh ground, fair trade, French press morning coffee through a curly straw. Isn't that right, Debbie? Mm-hmm. It's about getting out there and trying new things, making your mark, making friends with an Australian named Mark.
Oh, actually, I'm from New Zealand.
And you can even build.
Okay, so that was announced last week too. It's Horizon, and you think about how close we're getting to the time of the Oasis. TechCrunch, which is an online magazine, they talked about that this vision has been floating around in Zuckerberg's head for a while, and he really believes in the Oasis. He used to give a copy of the book to new Oculus employees, and he's working to make this so. But the interesting thing is that Facebook, as radical as this sounds, they're actually a little behind. Back in February, in Fortnite, any of you play Fortnite? A couple people, any of you have kids who play Fortnite? Right. So back in February, there was a concert where something like 10 million people, through their avatars, attended this Marshmallow concert. And I didn't hear of him. I didn't know who he was until I looked this up. But basically, he's an artist. And so for a 10-minute concert, around 10 million people, concurrent users, attended this. So it gives you a glimpse of the scale of this social virtual reality world and what people are doing. So when you see this and you think about that scale, how can the Oasis be far behind? And as technology tries to keep up with all of this, the tools are getting better. Developers have better tools. Facebook also last week announced hand tracking, which doesn't sound like a really sexy thing to do, but they're joining other tech companies such as Magic Leap and others to allow you to use your hand, and therefore eventually your body is the interface with the internet. So you might ask yourself, what does this have to do with libraries? I'm arguing that just as the first successful effort to get high schools and libraries into communities across the country more than a century ago, we have to make sure that all people have access to this really cool content and these devices. It can help them improve their lives, and it helps them to discover the possible. Libraries can help people have access to computers, or libraries have help people have access to computers. But these old Dells and these old computers that will fall over if you do anything more than read a magazine on them is not what I'm talking about. In this world, students will be able to do so much more. For example, they can do experiments, embodied lab experiments, if they have access to this content and this information. This is a screenshot of a game that one of my colleagues at ASU created, and it's basically teaching students about evolution and natural selection. And this is the desktop version. It's kind of cool to play, but when you play it in an Oculus Quest, you're basically using your hand and a virtual net to scoop up the right butterflies, the poisonous ones, and avoiding the non-poisonous ones and avoiding the poisonous ones. And again, studies have showed that this information is retained longer when you use your body, when you use embodied movement. So it's really important that we find a way to make sure that all students can participate in this and have access to it, whether that's at a community center or, more important, at a library. And the reason is that schools are falling behind. So schools might not be the way or the place to do it. Only 60% of principals say they assign laptops to students so they can do homework and have access to educational apps outside of school. If you don't have a laptop, a lot of these kids are trying to do this on a cell phone and in one of the older flip phones too. Just not fair in today's society. And so 40% of these students have to get it on their own. And of course, they're going to fall behind. And when you look at the growth in where the VR classroom of the future is going, this one study showed that by 2021, about 15% of all K-12 schools will have VR classrooms. And you can best believe that those classrooms will not be in the areas, in the rural areas, on Native American reservations, in lower income areas. So just like when I was a kid and I had to go to the library to get that full set of encyclopedias, we need to make sure that we're providing all of this technology for people. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Lower income students should be able to, go inside of a cancer cell or travel to the Arctic or to go around the world and see how this world is changing and to get excited about learning because the interface is something that they're used to. I know some libraries will do special events like this one here where they had a virtual reality look at climate change and the melting of the icebergs, but we have to kind of move beyond that and make sure that we're providing this technology and this content on a regular basis. The other area I wanted to talk to you about is how libraries can be very instrumental in retraining our workforce. Now, I grew up in an era digesting science fiction that was crafted by Gene Roddenberry, to tell the truth. And it was really hopeful, it was a positive future. Yeah, you had monsters that tried to suck all the salt out of humans and stuff like that. But his world was largely one in which we had gotten over racism and sexism and exploitation, and we had joined with other peace-loving humanoids like Vulcans to create a united federation for exploration and mutual support. But while we still might get to that future, right now we know that the near future is going to be really tough and painful. We've automated away 4 million factory jobs. So my sister, who worked for Chrysler for years, last worked in about 1980, was laid off, and because of health problems, she never went back. We're doing the same thing to retail jobs. Every time we shop online, retail jobs are going away. We're doing the same thing with truck driving and warehouse jobs. And so every time we order a bag of Tide Pods and dog food, another Amazon robot gets a job. Now, I'm not anti-technology. I love technology. I love the convenience of being able to do things online. But we have to make sure that we're thinking about the humans who are connected to these. Call center jobs, fast food jobs are all on the chopping block. At the Austin airport, last time I was there a few months ago, I actually ordered a chai latte from one of these robotic baristas, and it was pretty good too. And again, I like this, but what's going to happen to all those jobs that are out there? Chatbots and other AI interfaces are getting better and better because they're learning from you. Every time you correct the bot, Verizon, I'm looking at you, that can't seem to get you to the right place, it's learning from that human interface. Amazon made a big splash when they talked about drones delivering your packages, but that's maybe coming. But we know that they're already testing, Amazon and others are testing these little terrestrial-based robots that'll keep your pizza warm and give it to you within the delivery window. That's for real. And Uber is really thinking about the future. A lot of people think Uber's business is ride sharing, but if you read Amy Webb's really good book, The Signals Are Talking, we know that Uber's real business is they want to become the logistical infrastructure for the new economy with automated driverless vehicles, so there goes the truck driver jobs and the cab drivers, that deliver supplies to factories and people to their jobs. This is the real vision of Uber. There's so many jobs out there that are going to be automated away over the next few years. So again, well, what can we do about that? What is our role as journalists, educators, and librarians? And I believe our job is to help humans get to the other side of that, just as Carnegie and others did back in the day. When you look at the very foundation of libraries, it was just amazing that this man and others gave away so much money to create community libraries. But $66 million to create almost 1,700 community libraries, astonishing. The fact that he donated $300 million just to build the DC, main library back in the day. And he also helped fund that stately old Detroit main library, which I'm telling you, I just love that place. I mean, I would go down, and if I had an hour between classes as a college student, I would just go and walk around. You had to be careful because it was old, and there were some parts of it that, you could run into some people. But it was one of my favorite places to go because it just had so much stuff. But we have to take a cue from that and figure out how we can be the agents for change, how we can show the change for people. So back in 1900, I love this photograph because look how full that library is. I'm sure your libraries are full like this too now, where people were grabbing this knowledge. They were in there taking advantage of all that the library had to offer. And even today, when you look at Burton Barr Library in Central Phoenix, every Saturday, in the afternoons, there are high school kids, there are people down there using those computers because that's where they have access to them. So it's important for us to think about what are the tools and the technology that should be in our modern day temples of knowledge, to borrow a phrase from Carnegie. And what I argue is that just as you have books and reference material, having these headsets, these displays where people can put them on and really discover a world that's different from their own, where young people can discover careers and vocations that they might not have thought about. We can talk about climate change, but how about we show people some of the jobs and careers needed to combat climate change? Sometimes people can't imagine the future, have a hard time picturing it. When I was a kid and thought I wanted to be a computer programmer, it was just kind of like one of them big boxes with things that flashed in the Jetsons again. I really didn't quite understand it until I got older. But when you talk about the green new economy, for example, not pushing it on you, not being a partisan, but when you talk about that, how can we help people to see what some of those jobs are? If you work at the stamping plant in Detroit, can you see what it might be like to work in a factory where they're creating solar panels? What it might be like to put an AR headset on and be able to tap it if you forget how to connect the photons or whatever it is that you have to connect in order to make this thing work the way it's supposed to. This is what we can do with the technology that we have out there right now. We can teach people the skills they need to segue into new fields, into new vocations. And I understand that, libraries are not training, reskilling centers. You're not vocational technology companies, but you have to be there filling in the gap so people can get to this and understand what's out there. Artificial intelligence, augmented reality that can help train people for complex new tasks and maybe help them see what a new vocation might be. And then they'll be less afraid. I think a lot of people, the thing about the future that's really scary is because it's completely unknown to most people. Some of us embrace uncertainty. You know, when you're an innovator, you have to. But more people are just paralyzed by fear, and they start resorting to wishing we could go back to the way things used to be, when artisans and small farmers made our goods and grew our food, when manufacturing jobs provided a good living for people like my sister, who had a wonderful house in a middle-class neighborhood near the University of Detroit and earned enough money to go on vacations and send my nieces to college. They want to go back to a time when life was simpler and when you didn't have to worry about robots and cheap overseas labor taking your livelihood. But those days are over, they're not coming back. And what we have to do is think about that future. In Martin Ford's great book, The Rise of the Robots and the Technology and the Threat of a Jobless Future, he paints a realistic, bleak picture based on the fact that America is not even creating enough jobs to keep pace with the growth in the population. And as we've already discussed, so many jobs will be eliminated by technology, not just those blue-collar jobs and working-class jobs, but good middle-class jobs, such as programming, data entry, accounting jobs. They'll follow banking and travel agents and radiologists and copy editors and legal clerks into the abyss. And so we have to look at the other side of the coin and give people hope. And this is what I think libraries can do by showing. I'm a big believer that if you can see it, you can dream it, and you can be it. Just as those books and that microfiche used to take me to places where I could see glimpses of the future and my place in it, this new technology can help people imagine that future and the needs the future world might have. XR, which is extended reality devices and content, can help people to see, for example, the perils of climate change and also how they might fit into it with jobs in industrial sectors that are just emerging today. We can do that. The tools for virtual reality and augmented reality creation are becoming easier to use. So content creators, such as my students at the Cronkite School, can create realistic looking computer-generated worlds that show what that future will be. Libraries have to be the place where 58% of Americans who have just a high school diploma can level up, can start to explore new pathways to success, or to start the process of acquiring new skills. Again, I understand you're not the retraining center, you're not the vocational tech college, but by having this content and by having these headsets there, you can help people to alleviate their fears. The 331 section of the library should be reimagined as a VR XR room where workers can reduce their fear of the future and find new hope over fear and hear about new vocations. I hope I've shown you that these new interfaces are quickly moving from the fringes, Second Life, to places where some people prefer to hang out and live. And this is what our young people are doing every single day, and this is the world that they're going to inherit and that they're creating, quite frankly. We just can't leave people behind. AR, AI, VR, extended reality is the new communications interface, is how we're going to communicate with people. So before I leave you, I want to show you one more image of the future that came out many years ago. I love this movie because back then in 2002, it just seems so cool and just so futuristic. But my students kind of created one of those like last semester. It was called the Tiny Desk Reporter. And instead of a librarian, it was these little avatar reporters, and then we used IBM Watson to infuse the Tiny Desk avatars with the ability to give you information about sustainability and some other things. It took these three young ladies, one who was about 7 months pregnant at the time, about 3 weeks to do. So this is the clip. This is the fast clip at which technology is moving and changing. When journalism students who are math averse can figure out how to use artificial intelligence to power an avatar, you know it's coming fast. And librarians really have to get onto it. We have to make sure that all people, everybody has access to this so that we can have a world where people are hopeful and where people can at least get that glimpse of what's happening and how they can fit in, and then perhaps they'll go on and take those classes, try to create a new business, or try to learn some new skills. Thank you so much for listening to me.